Yeah, all those.
All right, Dave, maybe would you open us up in a word of prayer?
Father, we ask your blessing on this time together. Father, thank you for giving us the health and the wherewithal, Father, to be here. And Father, we just so thank you for this time and for your word and for Bob as he leads us, Father. We just ask your Spirit's blessing and Spirit come upon this place, Father, and fill us all in the hearts with learn. Teach our hearts, Father. Restore this your word in our hearts, Father. That we would know your redemption plan. All this is related to that, Father, as your Bible is. And Father, we just thank you for this time and ask your blessing on it in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 I love that expression, learn with your heart. We're going to get into that one of these times, and it might even be tonight someplace, but it's under the category that I've just kind of created is, what does God expect? Because obviously if you have a judgment, there has to be often what the expectation is, and then whether the expectation then was met or not met, and whether we're aware of it. But that's a great phrase. I'll have to keep that in mind. I'll footnote you, Dave, if I tend to use that. That's great like that. Okay, week number 4 at 10. It's with skipping Thanksgiving. I know there was a great rush of emails that I got from everybody here saying, can't we please have the Thursday, Thanksgiving, can't we have a class? But somehow I just said, nah, I think maybe we'll skip that. We'll all go have a nice turkey someplace like that. Okay, a couple little quick things to kind of get started. John, can you put up that web page? Has everybody gotten onto the web page, know how to operate it, know how to use it? To me, it's a great asset that we can use. I want to go over a couple things because this week was an active week on the web page. We reorganized it a little bit, and we posted some. And of course, the we there is the royal we. I send it up to Tom Burrows, and he does whatever magic he does, and somehow it ends up on the screen there. So if you can see it, great, John. Maybe you'll put that blue lines around it if you can. If not, if you have a copy, great. Just so you know, you can print that page. So if, I'm dating myself, but I'm very much a paper person. So I print it out, but there's really no need to do it like that. But that's just the way I operate like that. I know it's going to be very hard to see, but I want to go over at least, again, so you're familiar with it. We have a couple new headings, and we have a couple new posts. Under new heading, tools. I've organized, they asked Tom to do it, and we put the timeline, which was previously posted, the class bibliography, which was previously posted, the prophets data sheet, which was already up there. And then last week we used and we handed out in written form what I called the issues and context statement. And that was a 2-page document, front and back in this case, that listed various issues. And as we went through Elijah, we'll take a couple seconds to look at it again. As we went through Elijah, we kind of used those issues because, again, we are trying to approach the issue of the minor prophets on the basis of, I guess I want to get over here, minor prophets on the basis of issues and context rather than going through book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Although I wasn't sure, I knew I was going to say this tonight, I didn't know when. This is a much more difficult project than I envisioned when John and I first started talking about it. In a certain sense, it's much easier to go through a book and go through chapters and go through verses and understand it. It's a lot more complicated when you have this world of the minor prophets, fairly big world, as we said, and trying to break that down and not get hung up in the details of it. And for those, most of you don't know me that well, but those who do know me would know that I live in the weeds. That's where I'm the most comfortable. I'm a very detailed person. My whole career was spent learning the details and understanding the details and presenting the details. So to a certain extent, to be at 10,000 feet when I'm used to being at 10 inches is a difficult project. So we're going to kind of work through that together as we do that. So we have this new category called tools. I don't know that we'll post anything else to that, but we may. But it's tools are just what they are. They're helps, something that you can use to help yourself through this. The next one is a category which is called issues and context, and that was already handed out. That was a verbal statement of those issues and context. And you'll see underneath there, which is now posted, but unless you've gone on the site and copied it or read it from there, you have not. We haven't gone over in class. Issues and context, and then we have dash Elijah. And what we will do is each week or whenever it's appropriate, but over the next several weeks, we will add to that depending upon the prophet or prophets that we go over. So again, it will be in a Excel spreadsheet format, issues down the left-hand side. And we're going to go over that for Elijah a little bit so you see it. But that's how it's going to be posted up there. So if you're looking at what we basically did, that's where the main part is. We also have a new entry under maps. I footnoted appropriately. These are all from the Revised NIV Study Bible. The first two maps were already up there. Last week we used one, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah a little bit. The third one that's up there now is the Assyrian and Babylonian empires. I don't think we'll get to that tonight. In fact, I'm sure we won't get to that tonight, but we will get to that next week. So after that, a whole new category called kings. Since we're talking about context, various kings from the various empires that were involved, Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, Aram, they're all really important. And of course, the kings of Judah and Israel are very important. We have already handed out, so it was already up there before, the kings of Judah and Israel. That's a fairly, small print. There's approximately 20 kings of Judah and 20 kings of Israel, kind of the interesting observation. Judah was around much longer than Israel, but nevertheless had about the same number of kings. Israel went through kings like, I don't know what I can say here, but whatever you use a lot of quickly, that's what it was like. They did a lot on their kings. So kings, I posted the kings of Judah and Israel, which are passed out. I also posted the kings of Persia, and I was able to do that because there's only 3 or 4 that we're using. I have in draft form the kings, and the hardest one, frankly, is Aram Damascus, because it's a little fuzzy. Books don't agree on it. I'm trying to work through what one to present to you in terms of that, but we'll do that. I'll have that for you presumably next week like that. And then the last one, the last category is devotions. I think you all know that John and I, for 5 weeks before this class, it's on the webpage for Bay Presbyterian Church. And these were 20 or 25-minute quote devotions. They probably were really less devotions, more studies than devotions, I would think. And you'll see the 5 ones that were there. You can actually go on the website for the church and pick that up if you have nothing else you want to do like that. Other than John and Patrick, did anybody notice these little squiggles on the left-hand side of the devotions? Anybody notice? I saw them and I had no idea what they were. I was kind of embarrassed to ask Tom what they were since Tom posted it up like that. I thought maybe he just made a mistake or did something like that. I don't know, Patrick or John, can you tell me what that first one is on the left-hand side of divisions of the Hebrew Bible and Old Testament? What does that mean?
Well, it's Aleph, as our teaching pastor pointed out. Aleph is that is the first of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, and the second one is Bet. Looks like Bet.
Alpha, beta. Greek.
Yeah. And then the next one is Gimel. And the next one is Dalet, 4th. And then the 5th one is Hey.
So those little squiggly lines were not some kind of typo or not some kind of printing error. They stand for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in Hebrew.
Because the Hebrew did not have an Arabic numbering system. They just used letters to distinguish numbers, which was always helpful for me when I went into the concordance in the Hebrew Bible. But that's how they did that, and that's That's just how they operated. They didn't use numbers, they used
So-
letters.
So when I saw it, I thought it was a blotch, an ink spot. It was something. And Tom finally asked me, he said, Bob, you haven't asked the question. I said, well, frankly, I didn't know what it was. And I thought maybe it was a mistake and I didn't want to. Tom's doing all this time and effort and work. I didn't want to say he did a bad job with all these squigglies, but it turned out he knew exactly what he was doing. So that is the webpage. Please use it. Look at the documents. John will periodically call it. The room is not set up so you can really use that per se, obviously to read. But if you just go to one and pull up any one that you want there, John, just so you can kind of see. There. So there you see it's an introduction to the Minor Prophets, divisions of the Hebrew Bible. We kind of went over that week number 1. We also did that in one of the devotions. So that's, you can just push onto that, click onto that highlight there, and you can see it and read it. Or if you want to, you can also print from that. And again, for us, some of us who are older and feel more comfortable with paper, that's what I do like that. Okay, next thing real quick is you should have handed out in front of you, and it is posted, what I call the data sheet for the prophet Elijah. Everybody have that in front of you, at least those that are here. And if you're on Zoom, I don't know if you can pull it up on the webpage or not critical. I just want to make sure that, again, this is the format that we are going to basically be using. So I want you to get familiar with the format. And you'll see on the left-hand side, the topic. So for Elijah, we went over last week, the ministry dates, and gives the dates. And the interesting or contextual part of it is it's about 100 years before the mid-8th century prophets that we're going to review tonight. We have information about the manager. We have who it was directed to. Probably the most important two things, or very important things, are what was the message? What was going to happen? What were they prophesying was going to happen to whoever the recipients were going to be? So that's kind of like a key concept. So if you have it down here in this little quick block-like form, you can very quickly pull it up and kind of have a synopsis of what we are doing and what we have hopefully concluded what the whole book was about. So we said here, what will happen? And it was directed to Ahab under Elijah. And it says, your life for his life, your people for his people. And then at Naboth, I will bring disaster on you and your descendants, will make you like the house of Jeroboam. We're going to look at that tonight. You do not want that to be your epitaph, like the house of Jeroboam. That's not a good thing. So it just kind of tells you what happened. And then important, and where most of the time is spent in these little formats, are why the judgment. The message is, in one word, almost always judgment. And then I say it's always judgment with a footnote. Judgment with a slight exception, a small discussion, and that is hope. And then we'll have one of the things we're going to spend probably a week or half a week anyway on is the various minor prophets as we get towards the end of them. What are they presenting? Their basic message, let the cat out of the bag, no fooling, is judgment. But there's always that exception. There's always that exception. There is hope for what is often referred to as a remnant. And we'll discuss that later on like that. So that's another category there. And I think it's also kind of interesting to see what the response of the recipients of the message were. Did they repent? Did they jump up and down, say, wow, whatever they did, I think it's important and instructive. And the one we went over last week for Ahab, he was sullen and angry and went to his palace in Samaria. So you can see he was not impacted in a positive way by the prophet's message. And he will not be alone in that particular reaction like that. But again, I'm just trying to set up what is the issue, who received the message, what was the message, why was it a message primarily of judgment, with the caveat always, there's a little bit of hope, and what their response was. So that's kind of the format that we're going to be using. And there's on the second page, this one, some specifics about the context. Again, we did some of the context for Elijah last week. Again, he's 75 to 100 years before what we're going to do today, like that. But again, I want everybody, to the extent we can, get comfortable and work familiar with this document, this kind of document, because that's the format that we're really going to be using as we walk through this. Any questions on it? Everybody kind of have an understanding? You can take that home, the ones that got handed out, or pull it off the screen and try to get familiar with it, because again, that's what we're going to be using. Okay. Tonight we're going to look primarily at the minor prophet Micah. And one might logically ask, Bob, why Micah? And I'm not sure I have a great answer for it, but I have the answer that reason I did it. I said, first of all, let me ask this question. How many people here have studied Micah someplace before? Oh,
Amen.
good for you. Not many. I was going to guess, one would be a lot in terms of studying Micah like that. Number two, Micah fits in this first group of prophets, which are called mid-8th century prophets. Mid-8th century prophets. Somebody scream out, what year is mid-8th century? It is the year
1700.
1700.
700 to 800.
Right. Mid would be 750, ballparkish. So we get the concept. And one of the critical things, again, I call them entry points or dates. So you start looking at the context, and what's happening there is around 750, a little up the line from 750 or down the line from 750, towards 0 from 750. What is the big critical event that's going to happen in the life of the minor prophets and of the kingdoms that we're studying, Judah and Samaria? What happened? The northern kingdom, what happened to it? Fell, destroyed, dispersed. Any words you want to put? 722, 721. And we'll be looking at that next week in terms of the context a little. Well, we won't be looking at that one. No, we will. 750. The context of what was happening, because it was a tumultuous time, both in Judah and in Israel. And the prophets are speaking into that. They're looking and seeing what it's going to be like not too far in the future like that. So again, I think it's good to have in mind an entry point, a date, an event that you can look up a date. And this happens to be 722, 721, mid-century prophets. They're almost right there. So that's a relevant kind of entry point for you to look at like that. Okay, ministry dates of Micah. It's internal evidence. It gives the name of 3 kings of Judah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So I'm not going to take the time to do it, but again, you should have in front of you, quote, quote, in front of you, the list of kings of Judah and the list of kings of Israel. You should try to bring that with you each time, because that's something that we will refer to. And you just look down the left-hand side and you see Jotham. Jotham was roughly 750 to 735. I'm using the NIV dates. Ahaz, 735 to 715, and Hezekiah, 715 to 686. As you will see when we get into the context, these are really critical times in the life of Judah and in the life of Israel like that. And then, so it gives us a way, again, to kind of focus our attention on what we're talking about, what else is going on specifically, even if, for example, they, meaning the prophets, don't specifically refer to what those activities are. The activities are going to be matched up to a time period, and the time period is given in this case by dates like that. Okay, I said they're mid-8th century prophets. Another way you can divide them we talked about is, it is called, that's an unfair question. I'm used to asking unfair questions. I was a lawyer for many years. The unfair question is, what do I have in my mind is, it was pre-exile. 722 exile, or 586 was the exile, but it's pre-exile. It happened, this prophet and these prophets all happened before the exile in 586. So we know they're mid-8th century, approximately 750, and we know they're shortly before the fall of Samaria, and they are also before the 586, which is the fall of Jerusalem and the exile to Babylon. So I kind of, again, you wouldn't necessarily pick all that up by there, but if you look at these documents and put them together, I think that will be very helpful. Okay, Amos, we are going to do a little bit of Amos. Amos is, for us at this point, we're going to do mostly Micah, but we will jump back and forth a little bit between Micah and Amos. Amos is about the same time. He is a prophet at the time of Jeroboam II of Israel. And again, if you pull out your little chart, Jeroboam II is 786 to 746, mid-8th century, pre-exile, pre-Samaria falling, pre-Judah falling. So it's the same time frame. And the third one is Hosea at this point in time, and the first part of Isaiah. So if you really look at those four, if you're trying to get this idea, the first 39 chapters of Isaiah are also mid-8th century, pre-fall of Samaria, and pre-fall of Jerusalem. So if you want to kind of clump these together in terms of the analysis and thinking and what they're talking about, they're all in the same time frame. So that gives us a little bit of context working into it. How many people have I lost here? We're okay, relatively speaking? We're good? All right?
Good.
If you have any of the hard questions, Mary's available at the end of the night. She can answer them like that. Okay, the messenger. The messenger is from a town called Moresheth. It's a town apparently that was near Jerusalem, but it was clearly not a major city, although it was, and it's kind of interesting, it was on the Lachish. Is that an okay pronunciation? L-A-C-H-I-S-H, Lachish. Lachish was a battle in 701, and that's how the people wanted to get to Jerusalem. If you were going to invade Jerusalem geographically, that's how you came. You came down the coast, the Mediterranean coast, and then you turned inland and went east, and you had to go through this valley, and that's where this town was from. So, but it was not a major city. It was a more agrarian. He's not urban. He wasn't tied into the politics of Jerusalem like that. And that's basically what we know about him. And I'm going to ask the question is, we know nothing else. What is the significance of the fact that we don't know anything about this messenger? First of all, do we know a lot about any of the messengers? The answer is no. Now the question is, what is the significance? What do you think the significance might be that we don't really know much about the messengers?
They're insignificant. It's the message that matters.
Ah, Carol, thank you.
Here.
If I had a candy bar, I'd give it to you.
I like candy.
I know, but Gordon can have a candy bar, that I know. But that's, I think, I didn't read that any place, but I think that is the point that's made there, that who gave the message, because whose message is it? It's the message of God, the Lord. And the focus of all these prophets is on, this is what God told me to tell you. And you're not distracted by or influenced by or anything like that. These people are basically, if you know what town they were born in or when they did it, when they gave their message, which is set up often like that, you don't know anything about them. But that's significant in my mind. It's also, these people are not major players. These are not major political figures. These are not kings. These are people you know nothing about. And I have a question in my mind that we will not do tonight. It's on my parking lot list, is why does God seemingly use the least to carry out critically important functions in his revelation to us through the Bible? There's a lot. I started mulling things over. Moses, insignificant before he would have been killed, put in a basket, floated downstream to get an education and everything, but insignificant at that point. How about Jacob? Always a mystery to me. Second born, but got the first blessing. And he got it by thievery, or whatever word you want, deception, that's a better word, by deception. Next one, Joseph. What number was he in the children of Jacob? Last. And in that society, the last was the last. I mean, it really was that way. Next, Ephraim over Manasseh. We will talk about Ephraim. Ephraim is another name for Israel, the northern kingdom, and that's where the tribe came from, like that. But again, Ephraim, like Jacob, was the second-born child, and still got the first foreign blessing. And again, it was by deception, by purpose. Exactly right. Gordon's doing it. You know, and he said, oh, you know, he tried to switch it up like that.
But the big picture is Jacob.
And that's an answer. And the question is why? Yeah, and I don't know the answer, but it's a great parking lot topic. You could spend obviously several weeks like that. Next, Saul, insignificant. And who's next in line was insignificant?
David.
Saul was David. Right. I mean, you know, these are people that play huge roles in God's revelation to us, and yet they were always the most insignificant people. Micah 5:2 says, although small among the clans, the ruler who will rule over all Jerusalem is going to come from this small clan. And then, of course, Christ, born in Bethlehem, you know, small, nothing kind of, no pageantry, no army, none of the paraphernalia, if you will, of kingship like that. So, you know, I just think that's kind of interesting in my own mind, and I don't have the answers to all of it, but we ought to be maybe thinking about it. And John's going to work up a series answering those questions, I assume, John, right?
Oh,
If you already know it.
on the tip of my tongue.
Right, right. Okay. Next thing in terms of the topic, in terms of how did Micah receive his message? Again, I don't know that the how is so important, but it's kind of one of these things you cover each one, and it just says he received it in a vision. So there's a vision that he received it and he presented it like that. Recipients are both. He addresses. Micah addresses both the northern kingdom. In the northern kingdom, it's another thing that we have on our parking lot. I'll write it up there. Is the northern kingdom has more names than I have hair on my head. I mean, it's kind of an amazing part in your study. It's Ephraim, it's Jacob. I'm getting better at that. Have you noticed? I caught it this time. So it has a lot of names like that, and we'll put that maybe one time. Study that a little bit. Obviously, it's known as Samaria, the northern kingdom, like that. And also the southern kingdom. So the message really was to both, primarily to Judah, where he was from, like that. Okay, let's talk about, again, I think the important part. What was the message? It was, in one word, what would we say? The message was one of judgment. So if you get lock idea, a concept in your mind, the message here, and virtually for all of the minor prophets, is one of judgment. So the lawyer in me is hard to die. There are three therefores in Micah 1, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and it gives what the therefores are. So I would like somebody, and you'll see a sheet, because there were some questions when I would holler out somebody to read something. What was this chapter? What was that chapter or verse? Somebody take Micah 1, 6-7. Somebody else take Micah 2, 3 and 4. And somebody else take Micah 2, 5, please. Let's kind of rapid fire get through those.
1, 6, and 7.
Please.
Therefore, I will make Samaria a heap in the open country, a place of planting vineyards, and I will pour down her stones into the valley and uncover her foundations. All her carved images shall be beaten to pieces, all her wages shall be burned with fire, and all her idols I will lay waste.
All right.
For from the fee of a prostitute she gathered them.
That's, did I get, are you beyond 7?
No, it's just
Sorry, go ahead. Beg your pardon.
And to the fee of a prostitute they shall return.
Right, sorry. So, destruction, level. It's going to be a field. Foundations are destroyed. This is not some kind of, you know, bump on the road here. This is destruction. Who's got 2, 3, and 4?
This is what the Lord says, I will reward your evil with evil. You won't be able to pull your neck out of the noose. You will no longer walk around proudly, or it will be a terrible time. In that day your enemy will make fun of you by singing the song of despair about you. We are finished, completely ruined. God has confiscated our land, taking it from us. He has given our fields to those who betray us.
George, I'm curious, what translation is that?
And, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you have it on us. I didn't see you reading from a screen. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, I have an NIV, and you know, it says the magic word I was looking for is absent from that translation, and it's
NLT.
what is it?
NLT.
ENT?
NLT, New Living Translation.
I don't even know that one. Okay. The magic word is in the NIV is calamity. So, and that's, I'm not challenging the translation in a way like that. So you have destruction, you have a calamity. Who's got the 2:5?
Therefore, you will have no one in the assembly of the Lord to divide the land by lot.
Right. Somebody give me a thought. When you say there's, when the judgment is, there'll be nobody in the assembly of God, in the assembly of the Lord. What does that mean to you? What is that picture bringing up? These people were in what kind of relationship with God? What's the key word? So I told you I can ask a lot of unfair questions. What?
At that point, disobedience.
No, you know, what relationship? They were in a relationship that was covenant relationship is the word, magic word I was looking for. They were in a covenant relationship. Now he says, therefore you will not be in the assembly with the Lord. You're going to be cut off from the covenant relationship.
Covenant promises.
Covenant promises are gone. You'll have this land, gone. I'll be with you, gone. What happened to Samaria in 722, 721, it was destroyed, completely destroyed, and the people were scattered. That's the famous 10 missing tribes of Israel, never to be put back together again, at least up to this point in time. So, you know, we're talking about significant judgment on the northern kingdom, sometimes called Samaria, sometimes called Jacob, sometimes called Ephraim, but on the northern kingdom, a significant judgment like that. Okay, in chapter 4, there's 3 chapters where the judgment is actually outlined. Chapter 4, verses 4, 9 to 12. Can somebody pick that up and read it, please?
Why do you now cry aloud, have you no king? Has your consort perished? That feeds you like that of a woman in labor. I am in anger, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. And now you must leave the city, move camp in the open field, or go to Babylon. You will be rescued. For the Lord will redeem you out of the hand of your enemies. How many nations are gathered against you? They say, let her be defiled. Let our eyes go over Zion. Do not know the thoughts of the Lord. Do not understand his plan. He who gathers them like sheaves.
Okay, the main point that I wanted to bring out with those particular verses like that is you must leave the city and go camp outside. Again, it's part of the destruction of Samaria. You're not going to have a city to go back to. There's nothing there like that. And, you know, it says that you'll be menaced. You're going to be challenged. But again, the judgment is hooked here. Here's the first time that we see it. It is footnoted or caveat, whatever word we're going to land on like that. It says that you will be redeemed at some point in time. That's the restoration model. That's exactly right. So I always want to say that when we look at the judgment, we look at how complete it is, and it's significantly complete, but there's always that sliver of hope, that redeeming factor, that remnant that will be like that. All right, anybody who's taking notes or whatever, we'll skip it because of time, but chapter 6 has the same thing. 6 at 13. Therefore, I have begun to destroy you, to ruin you because of your sins. I'll give you over to others. So it's the same concept. A lot of these minor prophets, frankly, were, again, I probably used this before, repetitive. It's often used time after time, and I assume the repetitive nature of it, it's either how it was put together, or this was not just one speech at one point in time. So the same concept comes up lots and lots and lots of times like that. The thing that's interesting in chapter 6, if somebody could get chapter 6, verses 14 and 15, and read that for me, please.
You shall eat but not be satisfied, therefore shall be hunger within you. You shall put away but not preserve, and what you preserve I will give to the sword. You shall sow but not reap. You shall tread olives but not anoint yourself with oil. You shall plant grapes but not drink wine.
I call this it's a disaster, it's a calamity, but it's phrased so eloquently. It's kind of almost poetry. I mean, it's almost beautiful. The examples that he gives here, you're going to eat but not be satisfied. You're going to store up things, but they won't be available to you when you need them. You're going to plant, but you're not harvesting. You're going to press olives, but not be able to use the oil. I mean, the imagery here is beautiful. It's poetic. But the subject matter is a disaster. The subject matter is a calamity. But I say, so it's a calamity that is phrased so beautifully like that.
Haggai, the prophet, almost has those exact same words.
Ezekiel.
Haggai.
Oh, Haggai.
Says you will gather it, but it'll go in bags that are full of holes and pull out.
Amos does the same thing. He has a list of, you're going to do this, but not reap the reward for that. So apparently that might have been a mechanism that was frequently used at that point in time in order to flesh out the judgment and what it was going to be like.
And before we go,
yep.
Micah 6:8 is one of my favorite passages. Oh man, this is what is good. What does God require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God?
Right. That's 6:8, and we're going to have at least, I would think, a full week on what does God expect.
Yes.
And it's all the positive. As 6:8 is all positive. Walk humbly, and we're going to see here. That's why we go over the wiser's judgment, because these people were prideful, which is obviously the exact flip side of being humble like that. So hold that thought, Al. We are going to do that. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on that, because I agree with you that it's critical. And it's not only critical for the minor prophets, but it's also slips right over, and you'll hear a lot of references from me to this, because I happened to teach it one time and got very familiar with it, the Sermon on the Mount. And you'll see how even this is 750 BC, so it's 750 years before Jesus, plus another 35 or 40 before Jesus' ministry, and the same old issues are rearing their head once again, the pride of the people like that. So, okay, it's a good thought. We're going to do it and spend a lot more time on that. Okay, I'll skip over Amos. I have and will prepare, it's typed up, one of these data sheets on Amos. It will list what is the judgment, but they're very similar. And I don't know that it's critical. It goes over in terms of doing that like that. Okay, the point that I want to do, make sure we get a little bit of time to do, is why was there judgment? The judgment is clear. The judgment is bad. Both Samaria and Judah are going to be destroyed. The people are going to be scattered. For Israel, Samaria, they will not get back together again, at least until much later in time, because it hasn't happened yet. And the people of Judah would be in exile for at least 70 years. And then even when they returned, their situation was dramatically different from that which had been before. So significant judgment. Now the question, I think perfectly fair question to ask, and this was written to justify, to show why these terrible things had happened, was why the judgment. 2:10, I'll read that real quick myself.
I brought you up out of Egypt and led you, you're talking Amos, right?
No, Micah.
Go back to Micah.
I'll read it. Get up, go away, for this is not your resting place, because it is defiled. Great word. What does defiled means? Somebody tell me. Made unclean. And again, it was something that was clean and was then made unclean. There's that contrast that it was defiled. And for this is not your resting place. What does the word resting place or the term resting place mean in the Old Testament? What's its reference to? The promised land. Anytime you see the resting place, and resting place, it's in Deuteronomy 12, 9 and 10. That's a resting place, and it's called a resting place because they will be safe from their enemies there. And so what God is saying now, you had a resting place, I gave you a resting place, you were safe from your enemies there, and because of your sins that he goes through, you will no longer be in a resting place. You have defiled this resting place, and therefore you're not going to get the benefit of the promise. You're not going to get the benefit of the covenant. You will be scattered from the place. All right, somebody pick up, again, Micah 2, 1 through 5, and then somebody else 8 through 10.
Woe to those who plan iniquity, to those who plot evil on their beds. At morning light they carry it out, because it is in their power to do it. They covet fields and seize them, and houses and take them. They defraud a man of his home, a fellow man of his inheritance. Therefore the Lord says, I am planning disaster against this people, from which you cannot save yourselves. You will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. In that day men will ridicule you. They will taunt you with this mournful song. We are ruined. My people's possession is divided up. He takes it from me. He assigns our fields to traitors. Therefore you will have no one in the assembly of the Lord to divide the land by lot.
Right. That's really just devastating news. Can you imagine? You're sitting here. You're the favored people. God has chosen you. You're in this resting place. And this person from some little town outside of Jerusalem comes in and says, knock, knock, by the way, it's a disaster. It's a calamity. There's going to be no found. This is really significant judgment on the people. And I found it fascinating. 2:2, the answer is why. You covet the fields and then you seize them. What's covet mean? Desire, you want it. And obviously, 10 Commandments, thou shalt not covet. So it's a very specific use of the language there and understanding. You covet the fields and you seize them. Seize just has this concept and I thought it was great. Why did I do that? Because I had the power to do it. You know, he who has the gold makes the golden rules. And it's just a fascinating picture, word picture of what was happening at this time in Israel at this point in time is people wanted fields and they went and seized them. You coveted houses and you go and seize them. And obviously the only way you can get away with coveting fields and seizing them, you have the power, and whoever's field or house that you are taking doesn't have the power or the wherewithal or whatever it took in those days. Today, I'd say I didn't have a good lawyer, but that's to fight that. Now, last week, we did a lie. Does this coveting and fields and houses bring any recollection to anybody from what we did last week? What was one of the big examples that we gave last week of Ahab's sin? It was and it was led by Jezebel, who came up with the idea. That's it. He seized it. He coveted it. He wanted it. He didn't get it. So Jezebel figured out a plot and a plan in order for them to get it because they had the power to do it.
Who gets the bigger judgment, him or her?
I'm going to leave that to he who judges or her who judges. Maybe the judge will, but I'm not the judge. I don't know.
Well, this, the footnote talks about manipulating the legal system.
Yeah, well, that's when you say you covet something, you seize, you take it away, and then the next word is you defraud men of their homes, you defraud men of their inheritance. You seize is just pure power. When I look at defraud, to me, that's a different word, and that usually means some kind of manipulation here, I believe, of the legal system that enabled them, like, to take this property or to take these homes like that. So it's just raw power sometimes, and sometimes just being clever than the next person, and they don't have, again, whatever support system there was that would prevent that like that.
So it's like eminent domain on
Well,
steroids.
Well, respectfully, eminent domain has a legal basis.
Oh, yeah.
So this does not have a legal, this is,
Sometimes.
well, if it's done properly, it does. And it can be challenged. And it can be challenged like that. Okay.
So
So, no. So, these covet, these defraud, and then 8 and 9 talks over, says, really two situations. One, I had to go look up a little bit about taking robes of people that came through. So what was that all about? And then the second one was, rather than protect women, they took from women like that. They took their houses like that. And what the robe thing is, these were usually men who had been out in military service and were legitimately entitled for their service to have these, whatever robe, booty, whatever lawful booty it was like that. And people, rather than thanking them for their service, was stripping them of the benefits that they had appropriately earned from their service like that. And again, women were specifically entitled to protection. And not only were they not being protected, but they were being taken advantage of like that. So you look at these and kind of like the fascinating part about these sins that they're all talking about, the coveting the fields, the houses, defrauding men of their houses, of their men of their inheritance, coats, their homes. These are all sins. What kind of, again, these are all sins against who? Generally speaking, humanity, fellow man. These are what I call horizontal sins. These, and what does it violate? What's the second greatest command? Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't always forget as yourself, because love your neighbor is kind of easy. You have to do it as yourself. It makes it a little more stringent like that. But these are horizontal sins, and really fairly dramatic in terms of social justice issues. Kind of hate that combination of words because it probably means a million different things to a million different people. But these are all sins against their fellow man like that. But then it also, I won't take the time to do it, in 6:10 says your treasures are ill-gotten. And I'll just do it real quickly. You short people with dry measure. And then it says you use dishonest scales. This just shows you the depth of what was going on here, that the powerful were using every means possible to enrich themselves at the expense of those who could least afford it. This is like the perfect picture of the bad getting worse, like that. And again, these sins of other people using false weights and all those kind of things, again, they're sins on a horizontal basis like that. But then, and I guess we're going to have to wrap it up after I do this little section here, but then it says, somebody read 6:16.
You have observed the statutes of Omri and all the practices of Ahab's house. You have followed their tradition. Therefore, I will give you over to ruin and your people to derision. You will bear the scorn of the nation.
Right, so all the sins, the whys, up to this point in time have been horizontal. Now, the logical question would be, you observe the statutes of Omri, the procedures of Ahab, and followed the traditions of Ahab. And so the logical question would be, what were the sins of Omri, Ahab, and what were the statutes, and why was that such a, this is the justification. Here's God judging these people and judging them, I'll use the word harshly, meaning significantly, not unfairly, significantly, because all the sins they've done against other people, their own people. And then he says, you've also sinned against God. You've now switched from the horizontal to the vertical. And again, it's the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments, what's the first commandment? You shall.
Have no other gods.
No other gods.
Right. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, and soul. There's several variations of that, but they all basically say the same thing like that. So now again, we switch from the horizontal and the vertical. And let's talk a little bit about this. Is kind of like a recap. We'll do this pretty quickly. Omri, remember Omri? He was the fourth. We did this last week. Those of us with short-term memory, I guess we can still claim it since it wasn't this morning. Omri, remember his obituary, his religious legacies found in 1 Kings 16, 25 to 27. Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord, more so than any of those before him. And then it says as a second element, he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam and his sin, Jeroboam's, which had caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord to anger by these worthless idols. So we have within the obituary of Omri, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, more evil than any before him. And additionally, he walked in the ways of Jeroboam. And we'll come back to that in a minute. It's one of our parking issues that we're going to get checked off tonight. Then next is not only Ahab or Omri, but we have Ahab. Ahab was Omri's son, next in line, son. Again, obituary. I call it going from worse to worser, or whatever that expression is, from bad to worse. Ahab's obituary, same thing on a general basis, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any before him, and therefore he's saying even more than Omri. That's why I say it's going from worse to the worst, like that. And then the first additional sin that is attributed to Ahab is he did what was trivial that he did, that was committed the sins of Jeroboam. He thought it was trivial that he committed the same sins as did Jeroboam. And what's trivial? What's that mean, trivial? Insignificant. He didn't think it was any big deal. I did the sins of Jeroboam, so what? Now, again, the peeling away of the onion, if you will, because you have here Israel and the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they are being punished tremendously. They're being judged tremendously. They're going to be wiped off the face of the earth for at least some period of time. There's a little bit of hope. And they did it in part because they did the same things that Omri did and the same things that Ahab did. And both of them, now we're peeling away the onion skin a little bit further, they did the same things as Jeroboam. So the next logical question should be, Your Honor, what were the sins of Jeroboam? Because that's the building block. That's what you see happens like that. And very quickly, we did this a little bit last week. Jeroboam set up a competing religious system. He set up places of worship in the south in Bethel and in the north in Dan. And not only did he set up places of competing religious ceremonies and the like, but he put a golden calf in each one of these. And then, and again, you just wonder sometimes what people are thinking. He said, these are your gods. So he wasn't going to put them there as some kind of ornament like that. But, and obviously you can go back into the Exodus and into the time where the people, where Moses was their leader, set up the golden calves. So he set up this competing religious system. I told you last week, he also led the revolt against the southern kingdom, but he was authorized to do that. So the revolt itself was not one of the sins that they're talking about. But he was not authorized to, and it was sinful to set up this competing system, preventing the people from going down to Jerusalem, preventing the people from doing the sacrifices there, and setting up these false places of religion with the golden calves like that. Also, it says he built shrines in the high places. That's going to be another one of our, I was going to ask John, but if I ask you now, you can't answer it, but you can prep, because I know you did it before. I think it's important for us to all understand what this reference is to in high places. And usually when you talk about worship in high places, you also talk about Ashtoreth poles, and you're also talking about Baal, and you're talking about Baal's consort, and what a consort is, who is Ashtoreth, like that. So that's going to be one of our little parking lot systems. I think it's good for us to do it, but obviously it was not pleasing to God. It was not accordance to God. In fact, it would go back and look, it was specifically prohibited by God that all these Ashtoreth poles, all these worship places in the high places should be torn down. So when you see this shorthand in the high places, you just think Baal, think Asherah, think false gods, think idols. These are definitely prohibited items like that. And Jeroboam, right out of the box, Jeroboam, the first king of Israel, is violating so many of the rules of the road, of the commandments. And you wonder why, frankly, the big question is why God let it go on so long. Why the destruction not till 700? And then not to 586 like that. And one of the things we learned about God is he is merciful and he is patient. And they're fabulous lessons for us to learn. And a little one that I struggle with a lot is somehow, I don't understand this, but his timing is not my timing. It's on a whole different schedule. And God understands it like that. We don't. So did set up this religious golden calves, shrines in high places. And the last big one was he appointed all sorts of people as priests. The rules were very strict. Who were going to be priests? Who had to be? They had to be from what? What tribe? Levites. Thank you. Don't leave me hanging like that again. Very nervous. Levites. And that was not the case. It doesn't say it here, but I'm wondering how you got to be a priest, whether you were related to Jeroboam, maybe some shekels passed. I don't know. It's not really set up there. But clearly, he was breaking God's instructions to him that the priest should be from the Levites. And he did not do that. Now, we're going to end. I would like somebody to, Mike, maybe you do this for me, because if you do, okay, do 2-1. 1 Kings 14, 14 to 16. And somebody, Gordon, do this for me. 2 Kings 17, starting at verse 21.
1 Kings 14, 14 to
16.
Moreover, the Lord will raise up for himself a king over Israel, who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam today. And henceforth, the Lord will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and root up Israel out of this good land that he gave to their fathers, and scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they have made their Asherim, provoking the Lord to anger. And he will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, and made Israel to sin.
Read that last sentence again, Mike, because I think that's really kind of sums up what I'm trying to get across about the sins of Jeroboam. It's kind of, so much is lost when you use a shorthand. Oh, the sins of Jeroboam. If you don't really understand what those sins are, it could get lost. So give that last sentence again, Mike.
He will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, and made Israel to sin.
Right. So he both sinned and he made Israel to sin. It is not always the best to be the leader. That puts you in an awkward position because you lead, and if you go off the track, the people go off the track, and your sin is then responsible. Kind of the flip side, I frequently ask myself, somebody here might know, who saved Billy Graham?
What?
Who led him to Jesus?
Oh.
Well, I don't.
Mordecai.
I don't. But all I'm saying is, you know, a position like Jeroboam in those days, particularly as the king, he had such an opportunity to lead the people correctly and in the paths of what God had clearly instructed him to do. And he chose to, largely out of pride. Remember, the reason he set up Bethel and Dan was he didn't want his people going down to Jerusalem. Because if they go down to Jerusalem, he was concerned they might then support the king of Judah rather than he is king. So it was his own personal aggrandizement, his own personal pride that he wanted this to happen like that. Okay, the last thing to read, did I say 2 Kings 17, starting in verse 21?
21.
Yes.
When he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence. And he had warned all his servants the prophets. The people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there.
I mean, that's just a powerful kind of, closing statement, if you will. Again, Jeroboam caused the people of Israel to do that. And because of that, they were going to be plucked out of this resting place, and they were going to be scattered and moved to the Tigris or Euphrates, whatever that really was like that. So the point that I'm trying to really make here is that while if you quickly read over the sins of Jeroboam, then you're missing the main point. And if you just stop at Omri, and if you don't go back and see what the sins of Omri were, and if you don't stop and see what the sins of Ahab were, you're really losing one of the critical kind of closing points, the takeaways, if we will, is, again, we mentioned it is, God has been incredibly patient, and God has cause beyond cause to present this judgment, which is undeniably a harsh and long-lasting judgment like that. So I've run over my time a little bit. We will continue this for the next 4 years as I get. We're not making a whole lot of progress, but we're making it. I hope so, like that. Like that. Mike, could you close us in a word of prayer?
Lord, we once again thank you for the time together to study your word. We see you working out of your plan among the people during those days. Lord, we ask you to give us the right discernment to see what we need to do in our walk with you, stay with you, and to avoid the call. Jesus, we ask you to guide us in our decision making, be with us this week, and be with our nation in the next 2 weeks as we make critical decisions, and Lord, stay the hand of the evil one.
Amen. Next week, next week we're going to continue with Micah, and we'll throw in some Amos, and if we get a few seconds, we'll try to do a little bit of Hosea, probably to quote the first 3 chapters, which are probably the best known of Hosea, and we're going to emphasize the 3rd chapter, which is the redemption by Hosea of his unfaithful wife, Gomer / Israel, like that. Thank you for your patience. We are incrementally making progress.
Thank you. Love to all. Enjoy the week. Pray for the debate. Love to all. Pray for the debate.
Yeah.
See everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Of course, the National Socialist Party. Short studies.
One plane or whatever, not going off too far off the track.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You know, abortion. Women's health. There was a thought we were going to starve to death. So the deal was to get rid
Went
of
on the website last week and was not able to get any of the documents. I'm going to give it another try. But
Really?
yeah,
Because
I mean,
here's,
it's like a frozen page. It was the one you had up there last week.
which is just the homepage. And then you should be able to type, just click on, like, where is it here? You should be able to click on Kings of Judah and Israel.
Okay, so these are all links.
These are links.
Yeah. All right, give that a try.
They are all, give me send me an email, shoot for me.
If I can't, if I have trouble,
I think it's really helpful to have, you know.
I want to have all this.
Yeah.
This is really good stuff. And don't worry about everything takes longer than you think. And you're untangling. This is stuff that I mean, I really haven't read this. So I don't know.
It's easy. And I spent a lot of time, because I'm still thinking, oh, where, how do I get in? That's why when I keep emphasizing, maybe repetitious, but if I get confused, I assume other people do. You know, what are some entry dates? You know, what time frame?
Yeah, so pre-exile and
Yeah,
post-exile. That's a good way to divide it.
Yeah, it's a critical way of doing it like that. So, okay, well, but if you have any trouble, let me know. I really think any of these ones that are in round, like syllabus, timelines, all that is just a link.
Yeah, I have everything you've handed out so far, but anything I'm missing, I'd like to get.
Yeah, I'll go through it. If you have trouble, let me know.
Well, today, when we march against abortion.
Great class, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Really great.
They sent you here.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate all your hard work. Yeah.
So you had a nice trip.
Yes, I
That's
did.
great.
Yeah, I'll tell Mary. It's good. I wanted to sort of put items to it. My mom was an 8-year-old. Yeah, and then I thought, while I'm at close. My mom's 93, so. And I'm 16. I'm 66.
We had 10 years.
You're not 66, Chef?
Almost.
Oh, okay. Tuesday she'll be 66.
13.
And then when you call in, now we have 4
Pair of sixes like me.
umpire itself.
Mine's 27.
Call balls and strikes.
Yeah, they're both from.
We got 2 umpires.
At least.
And after class, I'll be 20 years old.
What's my point? Priests are like umpires, and he calls things different.
Comment on your bag before, Mary. That's a good
It's
bag.
refreshing.
Oh, thank you.
Or maybe that's a different one. I don't know if that's the one, but.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just picked
My
one.
cousin's husband, who was
My
the old
daughter travels quite a bit.
American Lutheran
That's her famous thing to bring back. Back from here, back from there. So I lose track of what's what.
if you were living in
They
adult.
come in handy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I know, I'll use some of the public ones.
Right, yeah. And those are nice. Those have
And
that
he
rectangle
was
bottom.
Right,
remarried
right.
They fit in there well.
Yeah,
after divorce. And then he came down and
whatever works. Got
went
something
to
going on,
Luther.
Carol, that you're,
Yeah, serving lunch to the choir tomorrow.
oh, are you?
Serving lunch for who's? Choir.
Oh,
Yeah. Aren't you nice? Do you want some help? No, thank you, but I do appreciate you asking. I'll be happy.
The U.S. grant in a house on the hill.
I don't know why, but I work better alone. Now, after you watching me do this, you're probably thinking, what I'm bad. I see what you're trying to do, and I think you need my help.
Yeah.
Come on, Howard.
Ours is what
Bag you
is.
got.
And, thanks for listening. But Bruce Walkie had the footnotes
Oh, on that one?
on
This is
that.
Okay.
I just had a quick question. I want to interrupt. Do you want me to ask them tonight?
Yeah, I'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, you're fine. You don't need to.
You gotta go home. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge.
Actually.
Maybe I could,
Yeah.
Take care. Good to see you.
One at the top of it.
Presentation.
I wish I could understand it much slower than the other thing.
Have a nice trip.
And, so I can try to map out
I'll be back.
5 weeks or what.
Yes, it's a quick trip, but it was a good trip. Everything was
One week's no good.
mainly one of the advice on my mom. And I thought, well, that's close to my sister, pretty good too. But it was a good.
Tuesday, we can shoot that in from,
Situation.
about 10 after 12 to
We arranged a lot of this help over the phone, and then you can use somebody. You just want to see and make sure that
You can put down your
eyes on the
favorite
situation, that everything.
Sure.
or wherever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Calls.
Well, we might want to choose something just a little closer. to
Okay.
what we're
You know,
constrained.
somebody was being abusive or was, you
So
know,
we may
placed
just
with
go
a
right
career, I wouldn't
Yeah,
know.
we've eaten there frequently.
I'll have you know.
So, not that I expected
The
that.
outdoor
either.
cafe.
Are you talking about restaurants again?
That's
Well,
all
my
I
friend,
have.
if they
That's
know
all I
you're
ever
watching,
talk
it's
about.
harmless.
That's
As long as it's not my
And,
kitchen.
and I don't think, I mean, I think. they're a nice
Okay, I'm
bunch of
gonna-
people, and I
Leave.
think
Yeah.
about that.
Bye-bye, Mary.
It's funny, while I
Good
was
job.
there, the assistant minister from their church came out, who knows you, John Kinzer.
Ginger, John Ginger.
Okay, that'll be Tuesday, the 27th.
I'll meet you here and just walk over.
Do we send back? We don't. Well, good to see you. Glad you're back safe.
Thanks.
There you go. Got it.
Okay, we just kind of figure out what's reasonable to accomplish.
Y'all
What are
take
you
care.
doing, what are you doing for lunch?
That's good. How were you
Salad.
feeling about what you got done tonight? It looks like you didn't touch Amos, but
Correct.
so
Supposed to be a
you
small
feel
one.
okay with that?
I am finding it in my own preparation difficult to incorporate
Isn't it?
to the
Yeah, you got that one, this
Oh,
one,
yes.
maybe it's, see, I was looking at how you.
And I kind of made the decision on the fly tonight is it, because a lot of it, I hate to use the word repetitious, but a lot of it is repetitious. And I said, to my mind, it's more important to get the key concepts of it gets across. Even it's not quite as broad as I would like to do it, but it's deep enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have theoretically skipped again Ahab, and Jeroboam. To me, that's really the meat of what's going on.
Yeah, and Patrick and I are coming in right behind you, and we'll be doing the
Yeah, that's right.
minor prophets
Yeah.
too, so we'll be getting
The overview kind of.
the flow on that too, so I would continue, I think.
Isn't it funny they're not all the same?
Yeah.
Like,
Got some different kinds. I don't know if you
bring
want.
that takeaway, so that it's not all context.
Right.
So I think, I think.
I wanted to get, God is, and that's one of the things that people don't like to hear is God judges.
Yeah.
That's not a popular thing,
That's exactly.
but God judges, and in this case, He judges, and while the punishment is harsh,
is also well deserved.
Yeah.
So that's a takeaway.
Well,
Excuse me. No, please.
An excellent group. Yeah, this one's all about like a yellow.
Isn't that weird?
So
I might
that's
trade
where
that one.
Then I can,
There more to get from.
Yes.
well, let's continue discussion on.
yeah, right. Look, that's my pen.
Yeah. There you go, sir.
I have a question for the teacher.
Yes, Gordon.
I couldn't get my head around the horizontal sin versus the vertical
Oh,
sin.
really?
Yeah.
That's a fairly, I think, common way of looking at the Ten Commandments. or the-
Because whenever I thought about it, I thought about, oh, the mind is desperately wicked, who could know it? And that is the sin against God. So if we are sinning horizontally, and that, I mean, the outcome may be horizontal.
Our son